Prince Christopher, a figure of striking presence, stood tall and proud. His golden hair, often meticulously styled, framed a face that was accustomed to command and admiration. He was the epitome of a royal heir, seemingly blessed with every advantage imaginable. His lineage was impeccable, his future seemingly preordained, and his confidence unwavering. He carried himself with an air of superiority, a bearing that spoke of entitlement and a deep-seated belief in his own importance. He was fearless, or so he believed, projecting an image of invincibility that masked a deeper insecurity. He relished displays of strength and power, often seeking opportunities to prove his mettle in tournaments and hunts. He saw himself as a warrior, a leader, a force to be reckoned with, and he expected others to acknowledge his perceived superiority. This facade of fearlessness, however, was carefully constructed, a shield against the vulnerabilities he refused to acknowledge within himself. He saw kindness as weakness, a sentiment that permeated his every action and decision. Compassion was a foreign concept to him, an emotion he deemed frivolous and impractical. He believed that displays of empathy were signs of vulnerability, and he was determined to project an image of unwavering strength and resolve. In his eyes, kindness was a liability, a trait that could be exploited by others, and he refused to allow himself to be perceived as anything less than formidable, and ruled with a cold, hard heart, his decisions often driven by self-interest and a desire for power. He showed little regard for the well-being of his subjects, viewing them as mere pawns in his pursuit of dominance. His reign was characterized by harsh laws, heavy taxation, and a general disregard for the needs of the common people. He believed that fear was a more effective tool than love, and he ruled with an iron fist, crushing any dissent or opposition with ruthless efficiency. He often mocked the forest from its edge, a vast and ancient woodland that bordered his kingdom, seeing it as a wild and untamed place, a symbol of everything he sought to control. He would stand at the boundary, surveying the dense foliage with a mixture of disdain and amusement, belittling its mysteries and dismissing its power. He considered the forest to be a realm of chaos and disorder, a stark contrast to the order and control he imposed within his own domain. Feeling powerful and untouchable, convinced of his own superiority over the natural world, he believed that his royal status and his military might render him immune to any threat, whether real or imagined. He reveled in the sense of dominance, the feeling that he was master of his own destiny and that nothing could stand in his way. This arrogance, however, blinded him to the true dangers that lurked in the shadows, the forces that would soon challenge his perception of reality. One evening, after berating his exhausted knights for failing to meet his unreasonable expectations, Christopher sought solace in his familiar ritual of mocking the forest. He had pushed his men to their limits, demanding unwavering obedience and relentless training, showing no compassion for their fatigue or their sacrifices. He saw their exhaustion as a sign of weakness, a reflection of their perceived inadequacy, and he used his words as weapons, cutting them down with his sharp tongue and his disdainful gaze. Christopher stood at the forest border, the line between his ordered world and the wild unknown, his presence a stark contrast to the natural surroundings. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, a smell he found both repulsive and strangely alluring. He gazed into the darkness, his eyes narrowed with a mixture of arrogance and curiosity, daring the forest to challenge his authority. Pride swelling in his chest, inflating his ego and reinforcing his sense of invincibility. He felt a surge of power, a conviction that he was destined for greatness and that nothing could diminish his glory. He imagined himself as a conquering hero, a ruler who would leave an indelible mark on the world, his name forever etched in the annals of history. Suddenly, a strange mist curled from the trees, like spectral fingers reaching out from the darkness, an ethereal presence that defied explanation. It snaked and writhed, obscuring the familiar landscape and creating an atmosphere of unease and uncertainty. The mist seemed to possess a life of its own, swirling and shifting in patterns that were both mesmerizing and unsettling, chilling the air and silencing the woods, as if the forest itself was holding its breath in anticipation of something momentous. The temperature plummeted, sending a shiver down Christopher's spine, and the usual sounds of the forest, the rustling of leaves, the chirping of insects, the hooting of owls, vanished without a trace. An unnatural stillness descended, broken only by the beating of Christopher's own heart. An unnatural quiet fell, a silence so profound it was almost deafening, amplifying the sense of isolation and vulnerability. It was a silence that spoke of hidden dangers and unseen forces, a silence that hinted at the presence of something ancient and powerful. The air crackled with an unseen energy, a palpable sense of anticipation that sent a prickle of unease crawling across Christopher's skin. Broken only by a faint, haunting melody, a whisper of music that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the forest. The melody was both beautiful and unsettling, a siren song that beckoned and warned in equal measure. It was a tune that spoke of forgotten magic and ancient secrets, a melody that resonated with a power that Christopher could not comprehend. For the first time, a prickle of unease, a sensation he had rarely experienced, began to stir within him. It was a feeling of vulnerability, a recognition that he was not as invincible as he had always believed. The forest, once a source of amusement and contempt, now seemed to possess a power that he could not ignore. Crept into Christopher's heart, a cold, unwelcome guest that threatened to shatter his carefully constructed facade of fearlessness. He felt a flicker of doubt, a whisper of uncertainty that challenged his unwavering belief in his own superiority. The unease grew, spreading through his veins like a poison, undermining his confidence and leaving him feeling strangely vulnerable. A feeling he angrily dismissed, refusing to acknowledge the growing sense of dread that threatened to overwhelm him. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to maintain his composure, determined to suppress the unwelcome emotions that were rising to the surface. He told himself that it was merely a trick of the light, a fleeting moment of weakness, and that he would not allow himself to be intimidated by the forest or its mysteries. Princes, after all, were never supposed to be afraid, or so he had always been taught. Fear was a sign of weakness, a trait unbecoming of a ruler, and Christopher had always strived to project an image of unwavering strength and resolve. He believed that a prince should be fearless, a leader who could inspire confidence in his people, and he refused to allow himself to be seen as anything less than courageous. But the forest seemed to be waiting, watching him with an ancient, knowing gaze, as if it understood his deepest fears and insecurities. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, their branches gnarled and twisted, their leaves rustling with secrets. The forest seemed to be alive, a sentient being that was aware of his presence and was patiently waiting for him to make his next move. For him to learn otherwise, to discover the true meaning of courage and the importance of compassion. The forest held a lesson for him, a challenge that would force him to confront his own flaws and to grow into the leader he was destined to be. It was a lesson that would be painful and transformative, but ultimately necessary for his own salvation. The Forest of Doom was no place for princes, especially not one as arrogant and callous as Christopher. It was a place of shadows and secrets, a realm where the laws of nature were twisted and the boundaries between reality and illusion blurred. It was a place where the unwary could easily lose their way, both physically and spiritually, and where the consequences of arrogance could be devastating. Its twisted branches blocked out the sun, creating a perpetual twilight that fostered an atmosphere of mystery and dread. The canopy was so dense that only slivers of sunlight managed to penetrate, casting long, distorted shadows that danced and writhed like living things. The lack of sunlight created a sense of claustrophobia, a feeling of being trapped and isolated from the outside world. And the air was thick with secrets whispered on the wind and hidden beneath the moss-covered stones. The forest held countless stories, tales of forgotten kings and lost civilizations, of ancient magic and dark curses. Every tree, every rock, every stream seemed to hold a secret, waiting to be discovered by those who dared to venture into its depths, and shadows that danced and shifted, playing tricks on the eyes and the mind. The shadows were alive, constantly moving and changing shape, creating an illusion of movement and presence. They seemed to watch from the corners of your eyes, whispering promises and threats, leading you deeper into the heart of the forest. The mist thickened, swirling around Christopher's feet like a ghostly shroud, obscuring the path ahead and isolating him from the familiar world. It clung to his clothes, dampening his skin and chilling him to the bone. The mist seemed to have a will of its own, guiding him deeper into the forest towards an unknown destiny. And from its heart stepped a small, ancient enchantress, her form shimmering and indistinct in the swirling fog, her presence radiating an aura of immense power. She seemed to be as old as the forest itself, her face etched with the wisdom and sorrow of countless ages. Her eyes glowed with an inner light, piercing the darkness and fixing Christopher with an unwavering gaze. Her eyes sharp and sad, reflecting the pain and suffering she had witnessed throughout her long life. They were eyes that had seen the rise and fall of empires, the triumphs and tragedies of countless generations. They held a deep understanding of the human heart, its capacity for both great love and unspeakable cruelty. She had watched Christopher's cruelty, his arrogance, and his disregard for the well-being of his people with growing dismay. She had seen the suffering he had inflicted, the pain he had caused, and the darkness that had taken root in his heart. She knew that he was on a path of destruction, and she felt compelled to intervene. And pried for too long, her patience finally exhausted. She had hoped that he would learn compassion and humility on his own, but his heart had grown increasingly hardened, his ego increasingly inflated. She realized that only a drastic intervention could save him from himself, and she prepared to unleash the magic that would change his life forever. Prince Christopher, you command with a fist, a symbol of your tyranny and your lack of empathy. Your rule is based on fear and intimidation, not on respect and compassion. You crush the spirits of your people, demanding obedience without offering understanding or support. Not a heart, a vital organ that seems to be missing from your very being. You are devoid of empathy, incapable of understanding the pain and suffering of others. Your heart is as cold and hard as stone, impervious to the pleas of the needy and the cries of the oppressed. You see men as tools, instruments to be used and discarded, their worth measured only by their usefulness to you. You exploit their labor, demanding long hours and meager wages, showing no regard for their well-being or their families. You treat them as if they are less than human, denying them the dignity and respect they deserve. Not people, individuals with their own hopes, dreams, and fears. You fail to recognize their humanity, their inherent worth as living beings. You see them only as a means to an end, a source of power and wealth, and you are blind to their suffering and their potential. Christopher scoffed, drawing his sword, the polished steel gleaming in the dim light, a symbol of his power and his willingness to use force. He felt a surge of anger, a desire to silence the old woman and to assert his authority. He believed that she was challenging his right to rule, and he was prepared to defend his position with violence if necessary. But his bravado faltered, a flicker of doubt crossing his face as he met the enchantress's unwavering gaze. He sensed a power in her that he could not comprehend, a force that dwarfed his own strength and challenged his sense of invincibility. For the first time, he felt a twinge of fear, a recognition that he was not as untouchable as he had always believed. A king protects his people, shielding them from harm and ensuring their well-being. He is a shepherd to his flock, guiding them through difficult times and providing them with comfort and support. He puts their needs before his own, sacrificing his own desires for the greater good of his kingdom. You only protect your pride, your own self-image, your own insatiable ego. You are more concerned with your own glory than with the welfare of your subjects. You are a vain and selfish ruler, more interested in appearances than in substance, more focused on your own aggrandizement than on the needs of your people. With a flick of her staff, a simple gesture that unleashed a torrent of ancient magic, the enchantress sealed Christopher's fate. The staff, crafted from a branch of the oldest tree in the forest, glowed with an ethereal light, pulsing with the power of the earth and the stars. It was a conduit for her will, a tool that allowed her to shape reality itself. Green magic enveloped him, a swirling vortex of energy that consumed him entirely, transforming his very being. The magic was raw and untamed, a force of nature that reshaped his physical form and altered his perception of reality. It was a painful and disorienting experience, a complete and utter annihilation of his former self. His body shrank, twisted and changed, his bones contorting, his skin rippling, his features melting away. He felt himself being pulled apart and reassembled, his very essence being redefined. It was a terrifying and agonizing process, a complete loss of control over his own physical form. His royal clothes vanished, dissolving into motes of light that swirled around him before disappearing into the mist, symbols of his lost status and his former identity. The fine fabrics, the intricate embroidery, the jewels and embellishments, all were gone, leaving him naked and vulnerable, replaced by slick, green skin, the texture cold and clammy against his transformed body. He felt the unfamiliar sensation of webbed feet and bulging eyes, the strange weight of his new form. He was no longer a prince, a warrior, a ruler. He was something else entirely, something small and insignificant. His voice became a croak, a guttural sound that was barely recognizable as his own. He tried to speak, to protest his fate, but only a series of croaks and rib bits escaped his throat. He was trapped in his new form, unable to communicate his thoughts or express his emotions. Where the prince had stood, a figure of power and authority, now stood nothing but an empty space, a void that symbolized his lost position and his diminished status. The throne room, once filled with his presence, now felt strangely empty and desolate, a testament to the transience of power and the fragility of human ambition. Now sat a small, terrified frog, its eyes wide with fear and confusion, its body trembling with vulnerability. He was a creature of instinct, driven by the primal urges of survival, stripped of his intellect and his reason. He was a prisoner in his own body, trapped in a form that he despised. "You will wear the skin of what you scorn," the enchantress declared, her voice echoing through the forest, a pronouncement that sealed Christopher's fate. "You have mocked the creatures of the forest, dismissing them as insignificant and inferior. Now you will experience life from their perspective, and you will learn to appreciate the beauty and the value of all living things. Learn fear, the emotion you have so long denied, the vulnerability you have so carefully concealed. You will experience the terror of being hunted, the anxiety of being exposed, the helplessness of being small and insignificant in a world of giants. You will learn to appreciate the value of safety and security, and you will understand the importance of protecting those who are weaker than yourself. Weakness, the state you have so vehemently rejected, the condition you have so ruthlessly exploited. You will know what it is like to be powerless, to be at the mercy of others, to be unable to defend yourself. You will learn to rely on the kindness of strangers, and you will understand the importance of offering help to those in need. And compassion, the emotions you have so long suppressed, the qualities you have so consistently scorned. You will learn to empathize with the suffering of others, to understand their pain, and to offer them comfort and support. You will discover the transformative power of kindness, and you will understand the importance of treating all living beings with respect and dignity. Find Princess Maya and earn a true kiss by midnight, a kiss born of genuine affection and selfless love, a kiss that transcends physical appearance and recognizes the beauty within. Only then will the curse be broken, and you will be restored to your former self. Or remain a frog forever, trapped in your amphibian form, a permanent reminder of your arrogance and your cruelty. You will spend the rest of your days hopping through the forest, a lonely and forgotten creature, forever separated from the world you once knew. Christopher tried to protest, to plead for mercy, to beg for another chance. But his words were trapped within his transformed body, unable to escape his amphibian throat. He opened his mouth, desperately trying to form the words that would save him, but only a series of croaks and rib bits emerged. But only a desperate croak escaped, a sound of utter despair and hopelessness. He was trapped, helpless, and alone, his fate sealed by his own arrogance and cruelty. He had been given a chance to redeem himself, but he had no idea how to begin. The enchantress vanished, fading back into the mist as quickly and mysteriously as she had appeared, leaving Christopher alone to face the consequences of his actions. Her departure left a void in the forest, a silence that was even more profound than before. Leaving him alone in the dark, damp woods, a small, green frog in a vast and unforgiving world. The forest, once a source of amusement and contempt, now seemed menacing and hostile, filled with unseen dangers and unknown terrors. He was utterly alone, with no one to turn to and no idea how to survive. The prince's journey had truly begun, a quest for redemption that would test his courage, his compassion, and his very soul. He had been stripped of his power, his status, and his identity, and he would have to learn to rely on his own inner resources to survive. He had a long and difficult road ahead of him, but he had no choice but to face it. And time was already running out, the clock ticking relentlessly towards the midnight deadline that would determine his fate. He had to find Princess Maya, and he had to earn her true love's kiss before it was too late. The fate of a prince, now a frog, hung precariously in the balance. Christopher, having been suddenly transformed into a small green frog, was completely overwhelmed by his new reality. The forest seemed gigantic and full of unseen dangers. The ancient castle clock tower began to chime, its deep resonance echoing. It was 11 o'clock, a late hour, and Prince Christopher stood tall,